The room was too clean for what was about to happen. White walls, a long table, a glass jug of water that no one touched. I remember the sound of the chair legs scraping the floor when I sat down. That sound stayed with me longer than his words. It was sharp, careless, like the moment itself. My husband sat across from me. No anger on his face, no sadness, just a calm I had never seen before. His mother was beside him, her hands folded, eyes steady. The lawyer adjusted a file and cleared his throat. I still believed this meeting was about fixing things. I was wrong. He did not look at me when he spoke. He looked at the table, at the papers, at anything except my face. "I want the house," he said. "The cars, the business, the accounts, everything." He said it like he was reading a grocery list. Milk, bread, my life. I waited for him to pause. I waited for someone to say my name. No one did. The word everything echoed in my head. It felt heavy, like a door closing slowly but firmly. I felt my hands under the table. They were still. I noticed that. I was proud of that, even then. Inside, something cracked, but outside, I did not move. His mother nodded once, just once. That small movement hurt more than his words. The lawyer turned to me. "Do you agree?" Agree? The question felt unreal. I looked at the glass jug. Light passed through the water and broke into soft shapes on the table. I thought of mornings in that house, of keys hanging by the door, of the remote control that always went missing, of ordinary things that now felt like they were being taken from me without ceremony. "I need time," I said. My voice sounded calm. I did not recognize it. It belonged to someone stronger than I felt. He finally looked at me then. There was a small smile, not cruel, not kind, confident, like he already knew the ending. "You don't have time," he said. "This is how it's going to be." That sentence landed harder than everything else. This is how it's going to be. As if my life was a decision already made. As if I was a chair to be moved, a light to be turned off. I glanced at the papers. Lines of text, numbers, boxes to sign. My name appeared only where a signature was needed, not in the story, just at the end. I thought of the house. I had chosen the paint color myself, soft gray, because it felt quiet. I remembered standing in the empty living room years ago, holding the keys, feeling like I had arrived somewhere safe. Now those same keys felt heavy in my bag, like they already belonged to someone else. My closest friend was not in the room, but her voice was. I could hear her from days before, telling me to be reasonable, to let things go, to start fresh. I had trusted her. I had told her everything. I realized then that my husband knew things I had never told him directly. That was the first sharp cut, deeper than the divorce itself. I said nothing. Silence became my shield, even though I did not know it yet. The lawyer spoke again, explaining timelines, steps, consequences. His words floated above me. I caught pieces of them like dust in sunlight. Transfer, ownership, settlement. My husband reached for a pen. He held it with confidence. The same hand that once held mine in a hospital hallway. The same hand that used to turn off the light when I fell asleep on the couch. Now it hovered over paper, ready to erase me. "Sign," he said softly. I looked at him, really looked at him. I tried to find the man I married. I found only distance. "I won't sign today," I said. His jaw tightened. His mother exhaled loudly. The room shifted. "You're making this difficult," she said. Difficult. I stood up slowly. I did not rush. I picked up my bag. The sound of the zipper closing felt loud, final. "I will respond through my lawyer," I said. That was the moment they underestimated me. I could feel it, not because they said anything, but because they relaxed. They thought silence meant weakness. They thought patience meant surrender. As I walked out, I touched the door handle. Cold metal, solid, real. Outside, the air felt different, heavy but honest. I sat in my car and placed my hands on the steering wheel. I did not cry, not yet. I stared straight ahead. The world continued as if nothing had happened. Cars passed, people laughed somewhere nearby. I realized something important then, even though I couldn't explain it fully. They had asked for everything they could see. They had no idea what I was really holding on to, and they had no idea what silence could do.
The days after that meeting did not explode. They did not fall apart loudly. They moved forward in a strange, quiet line, like nothing had changed. I woke up the next morning at the same time. The alarm rang softly. I reached out and turned it off before it rang twice. That small action felt important. Control still existed in small places. The house was quiet, too quiet. His side of the bed was untouched. The pillow still held its shape. I stood there for a moment, not sitting, not moving, just looking at the empty space like it was a message written without words. I made the bed anyway. I always did things in order, sheets straight, pillows aligned. It was not about him, it was about me reminding myself that structure still lived here. In the kitchen, the light switch clicked on. The sound was sharp in the silence. I filled the kettle with water and waited. While it heated, I watched the small clock on the wall. The second hand moved steadily, without emotion. Time did not care about divorce meetings. I held my cup with both hands. The warmth spread slowly into my fingers. That warmth became something I focused on. It was real. It stayed. I walked through the house as I always had. I checked the windows. I picked up a book left open on the table. I moved a pair of shoes back to their place by the door. Ordinary movements, ordinary objects. Keys hung on their hook. The remote control lay exactly where I left it. The door locked and unlocked the same way. Everything worked. That confused me more than the meeting itself. I went to work. I answered emails. I nodded in meetings. I smiled at the right moments. No one knew. Or maybe they sensed something but did not ask. People rarely ask when silence looks polite. At lunch, I ate alone. I watched others talk and laugh. Their voices blended into a soft noise behind me. I chewed slowly, tasting very little. In the evenings, I returned to the house. I unlocked the door and stepped inside. The same smell, the same floor under my feet. I turned on lamps instead of overhead lights. I liked the softer glow. It felt kinder. I sat on the couch and stared at the wall where a photo used to hang. I had taken it down months ago, not knowing why. Now I understood. My body had known before my mind did. Sometimes I reached for my phone to text my closest friend. My fingers stopped before typing. Her advice replayed in my head. Be reasonable, let it go. I placed the phone face down. Silence again. At night, I lay in bed listening to the house breathe. Pipes clicked, the refrigerator hummed. The wind touched the windows gently. These sounds had always been there. I had just never listened so closely. My thoughts moved slowly, carefully. He wants everything. He thinks it is already done. They think I will agree. I did not argue with the thoughts. I let them pass. Fighting them felt like wasting energy I didn't have yet. I began noticing details. The mail that arrived every morning, the names printed on envelopes, which ones were addressed to both of us, which ones were addressed only to me. I stacked them neatly. I did not open some of them right away. I wanted to feel their weight first. I cleaned more than usual, not because the house was dirty, but because cleaning gave my hands something to do. When my hands moved, my mind slowed. I wiped surfaces carefully. I folded laundry slowly. I placed each item where it belonged. The house became a map of my life. Every object told a story. Some stories were painful, others were just facts. The chair by the window where I used to read, the drawer where important papers were kept, the small safe behind winter coats. I opened the safe one evening, not in panic, in curiosity. Inside were documents I had not looked at in years, old contracts, receipts, copies of agreements, things I had trusted others to handle. I closed the safe again without removing anything. Not yet. That night I cried for the first time, quietly, without sound. Tears slid down my face and into my pillow. I did not wipe them away. I let them come and go like waves. Crying did not make me weak, it made me honest. In the morning, my face looked tired but clear. I stood in front of the mirror and looked at myself. I did not ask questions. I did not demand answers. I simply said, "You are still here." Days passed like this, calm, heavy, controlled. He did not call. His mother did not call. My friend sent one message, "Hope you're okay." I did not reply. Each day, the shock softened into something deeper. Not anger, not fear. Something colder. Something focused. I stopped expecting fairness. I stopped expecting kindness. Instead, I started observing. Who paid which bills? Whose name appeared where? Which accounts I could access without asking? I wrote nothing down yet. I only watched. Silence continued to protect me. It gave me space to see clearly. They thought the meeting had ended things. In reality, it had only slowed the noise enough for me to hear the truth. And in that quiet, ordinary life, something inside me began to awaken.
The first real pain did not come from my husband. It came from someone I trusted to stand beside me. I met my closest friend for coffee on a gray afternoon. The place was small and warm, with a bell on the door that rang when people entered. I chose that cafe because it felt safe, familiar. We had sat there many times before, sharing stories, sharing secrets. She arrived late. I noticed that right away. She was never late with me. She hugged me, but her arms felt careful, like she was measuring the distance. We sat down. The table between us felt wider than it used to. "So," she said, stirring her coffee without looking at me, "how are you holding up?" The question sounded practiced. "I'm managing," I replied. Silence settled between us, not the comfortable kind we once shared. This silence pressed down, asking to be filled. She leaned forward. "I think you should just accept the offer," she said. "Dragging this out will only hurt you." There it was. I looked at her. Her eyes did not meet mine. She kept stirring, even though the sugar was already dissolved. "Why would you say that?" I asked, calmly. She sighed. "Because he's being generous. Most men wouldn't be." Generous. The word felt wrong in my mouth. I tasted bitterness instead. I built that business with him. I lived in that house. I paid for things. I worked. She waved her hand lightly, as if brushing away dust. "But it's mostly in his name. You know how these things work." I felt something shift inside me, a quiet click, like a lock closing. "How do you know what's in his name?" I asked. She froze, just for a second, but it was enough. "He mentioned it, quickly. When he asked me to talk to you." The cafe noise faded. Cups clinked somewhere far away. I could hear my own breathing. "He asked you?" I repeated. She nodded. "He's worried about you. He doesn't want things to get ugly." I smiled politely. My hands rested on the table. They did not shake. "How long have you been talking to him?" I asked. She looked away. "A while." A while. That word opened a wound I had not known was there. I thought of the nights I cried on her couch, the messages I sent her when I was confused, scared, unsure. I thought of the details I had shared, believing they were safe. Now I understood where his confidence came from. The betrayal settled slowly, deeply. It was not loud. It did not explode. It sank in, heavy and cold. "I need to leave," I said. She reached for my hand. I pulled it back gently. "I was only trying to help," she said. "I know," I replied. And I meant it. She thought she was helping. That made it worse. Outside, the air felt sharp. I walked without direction for a few minutes, letting the feeling move through me. Cars passed, people hurried. Life continued. At home, I locked the door behind me. The sound of the lock sliding into place felt final. That night, I did not cry. I sat at the kitchen table with the lights off, only the small lamp on. Papers lay in front of me, old mail, notes, nothing important yet, just enough to remind me that words mattered. I realized something painful and important. The betrayal was not just personal, it was strategic. They had spoken about me. They had planned without me. They had assumed I would follow. That assumption was their mistake. I removed my friend's number from my favorites. I did not block her. Blocking felt emotional. I wanted to stay clear. I slept deeply that night, for the first time since the meeting. In the morning, I opened the safe again. This time, I took everything out and placed it on the table. The deeper wound had done something unexpected. It had removed my last hesitation. And in that quiet kitchen, surrounded by documents and silence, I understood that loyalty had ended, but clarity had begun. The awakening did not come with anger. It did not come with tears or shaking hands. It came with a calm I had never known before. I sat at the kitchen table early in the morning, sunlight coming through the window in thin lines. Dust floated in the air, slow and peaceful. The house was still. No voices, no demands. Just me and the sound of pages moving as I sorted through papers. For the first time, I was not afraid of what I might find. I spread everything out carefully. Contracts, statements, old folders with labels written in my handwriting. Some were faded, some were newer. I touched each one like it mattered, because it did. I realized something simple and powerful. These papers did not belong to him. They did not belong to his mother. They did not belong to my friend. They belonged to the truth. I did not rush. I made tea. I drank it slowly while reading. I underlined nothing. I wrote nothing yet. I just read. My name appeared more often than I expected. Not everywhere, but enough. I saw patterns, small details, dates that mattered, signatures that were not his alone, contributions that were never spoken about out loud. I felt no excitement, no revenge, just clarity. This was not about winning. This was about not disappearing. I stood up and walked through the house. Each room felt different now, not empty, defined. The desk where I handled invoices, the cabinet where business files were stored, the shelf where old planners sat, filled with my notes. I opened one planner at random. My handwriting stared back at me. Appointments, payments, decisions I had made quietly, without praise. I smiled softly. I had always been here. I returned to the table and made a simple decision. I would not explain myself to anyone. I would not argue. I would not beg. I would prepare. That was the awakening. Not loud, not dramatic, firm. I created a small routine. Every morning I spent 1 hour reviewing documents, 1 hour only. I stopped even if I wanted to continue. Control mattered more than speed. In the afternoons, I lived normally. Work, meals, short walks, silence. At night, I wrote questions, not emotions, questions. What is in my name? What was agreed verbally but recorded in writing?
What can be proven without my voice? I slept better. My body responded to the structure. I did not contact a lawyer yet. I wanted to understand first. Knowledge before action. My phone stayed quiet. No messages from him, no apologies, no pressure. That silence told me everything I needed to know. He believed I was frozen. He did not know I was awake. One evening, I stood in front of the mirror again. I looked at my face, tired but steady. "I will move when I am ready," I said aloud. The words felt right. That night, I placed the documents back into the safe, but this time I arranged them carefully, in order, by category. I locked the safe and placed the key in a different drawer than before. Small changes, important ones. The awakening was complete. I was no longer reacting. I was choosing.
The first paper I touched that morning felt heavier than the rest. Not because it was thicker, but because I remembered the day it was signed. I sat at the table again, the same place where silence had become my teacher. Sunlight filled the room, brighter now, as if the house itself was paying attention. I opened the safe and took everything out, stacking the documents carefully. I did not rush. Rushing creates mistakes. Mistakes create noise. I wanted none of that. I started with ownership. Property documents came first. The house. I had avoided them for years, trusting that everything was handled. Trust had made me lazy. That realization stung, but I accepted it without judgment. My name was there, not alone, not fully, but present, recorded, signed. That mattered. I read every line, slowly. I noticed words I had once ignored, clauses, percentages, conditions. The paper did not lie. It waited patiently for someone to read it properly. I moved on to business documents, formation papers, bank authorizations, old emails printed and filed, invoices with my signature at the bottom, decisions made during quiet evenings while others slept. My role was not decorative, it was structural. I had been taught to think of my work as support, but support holds things up. Without it, things fall. I felt no anger toward my past self, only understanding. Next came financial statements. I compared dates, amounts, transfers. I noticed something important. Some accounts were joint, some were not. Some had restrictions that required both signatures. He had forgotten that part. Or maybe he assumed I would forget. I smiled once, briefly, and then stopped. Smiling too early felt careless. I created folders, physical ones, simple labels, property, business, accounts, communication. In the communication folder, I placed messages, emails where decisions were discussed, agreements confirmed, moments where he thanked me, acknowledged my role. Not emotional messages, practical ones. Truth hides in ordinary sentences. By midday, my head felt full. I closed everything and went for a walk. Movement helped me think without pressure. Outside, the world continued like always. Children laughed, a dog barked, someone watered plants nearby. Life did not pause for personal awakenings. When I returned, I felt grounded again. That afternoon, I made one call. I chose a lawyer carefully, not the loudest, not the most aggressive. Someone calm, someone who listened more than he spoke. When his assistant answered, I did not explain everything. I asked for a consultation. I asked what documents to bring. Her voice was neutral, professional, safe. That was enough. I hung up and sat quietly. The power was not in confrontation, it was in preparation. That evening, I placed the folders in a drawer by my desk, not hidden, not displayed, accessible. I held the keys to the house in my hand. I turned them over slowly. They no longer felt like symbols of loss. They felt like responsibility. I placed them back on the hook. Nothing had changed on the outside yet, but inside, everything had shifted. The papers had spoken, and I had listened.
The plan did not arrive all at once. It formed quietly, piece by piece, like a puzzle completed without forcing any part. I met the lawyer on a Tuesday morning. The office was simple, no heavy furniture, no dramatic walls filled with awards, just clean desks, files stacked neatly, and a calm man who looked at documents the way a doctor looks at test results, carefully, without emotion. I placed my folders on the table one by one. "I want to understand my position," I said. "Not to fight, to be clear." He nodded. "Clarity is power," he replied. Those words stayed with me. He read silently, long pauses, occasional notes, no interruptions. I appreciated that. When he spoke, he did not raise his voice. He did not promise victory. He explained facts. "You are not invisible here," he said. "They assumed you were." I did not react. I simply listened. We discussed boundaries, what to say, what not to say, when silence worked better than response. We discussed money, access, rights. Most importantly, we discussed patience. "Do nothing publicly," he advised. "Let them move first." That fit perfectly with who I had become. I paid him and left with a folder of my own, instructions written clearly, steps numbered, no rush. At home, I adjusted my routine. I stopped paying certain bills that were not legally mine, not out of spite, out of correctness. I continued paying what I was responsible for. Clean lines, no confusion. I changed passwords, calmly, methodically. Email, cloud storage, banking access that was mine alone. Each change felt small, but together they created quiet walls. I did not announce anything. Silence again. I moved important documents to a secure location outside the house, copies only. Originals stayed where they were. I trusted order. I stopped sharing information with anyone, even neutral people. Information travels faster than truth. My phone rang one evening. His name appeared. I let it ring, not because I was afraid of his voice, because answers create openings, and I was not ready to open anything yet. The plan was not about control over him. It was about control over myself. Days passed. I received official letters, neutral language, formal tone. I read them once and filed them away. I responded only when required, always through my lawyer, always in writing. I noticed changes, small ones at first. A missed payment notice addressed to him, a request for access I did not approve, a delay that did not exist before. The structure was shifting. I stayed calm. I cooked meals, I slept well, I walked in the evenings. From the outside, I looked like someone who had accepted loss. From the inside, I was building stability. The plan was working because it was invisible, and invisibility, I learned, is powerful when others are watching the wrong place. The first consequences did not arrive with noise. They arrived with confusion. It began with a message from a utility company, not angry, not urgent, just a simple notice asking for clarification about an account holder. I read it twice, then placed it in the folder labeled Accounts. I did nothing. That was the hardest part, doing nothing when action feels tempting. A few days later, another message arrived. This time, it was about access. Someone had tried to make a change without proper authorization. The request had been denied automatically. I imagined his face when that happened, not angry yet, just surprised. Surprise is the first crack in confidence. The house remained quiet. Lights turned on, water ran, the internet worked. Everything I was responsible for continued without interruption, but small things shifted. The shared storage account sent an alert, a login attempt from a device I did not recognize. I did not block it. I simply let the system do what it was designed to do: deny access. That evening, my phone rang again. His name. I let it ring. I placed the phone face down and returned to my book. The page stayed open where I left it. That felt important. My life did not pause for his panic. The next day, his mother called. I did not answer. Not because I was afraid of her voice, because answers create openings, and I was not ready to open anything yet. A letter arrived 2 days later. Formal, polite, asking for cooperation, asking for flexibility. I forwarded it to my lawyer. He replied with one sentence: "We stay the course." The first real consequence appeared a week later. The business account. I received a notification that required my approval, a routine process I had once handled without thought. This time I read it carefully. The approval was needed because of a clause he had overlooked. One signature was not enough. Mine was required. I did not approve it immediately. I waited. Waiting was not punishment, it was protection. Within hours, the calls started. One call, then another, then messages. I read none of them. I saw the numbers rise on the screen. Missed calls do not make sound when the phone is on silent. Silence had become my strongest boundary. Later that evening, I received an email from him, short, controlled. "Why are you doing this?" I smiled slightly, then stopped myself. Smiles can turn into pride, and pride can lead to mistakes. I did not respond. Instead, I reviewed the document again. I approved it the next morning through proper channels, with conditions clearly stated. Professional, clean, no emotion. The shift was subtle, but it mattered. He was no longer moving freely. He was bumping into invisible walls. At work, I stayed focused. My routine remained unchanged. Colleagues noticed nothing. That anonymity protected me. At home, I opened windows and let fresh air in. Light filled the rooms. The house felt lighter somehow, as if it sensed the balance returning. Another letter arrived. This one less polite. It asked for immediate discussion. I did not agree. Instead, my lawyer sent a response, brief, firm, based on documents, not feelings. That night, I slept deeply. I dreamed of doors closing softly, not slamming shut, of locks turning smoothly, not breaking. The consequences continued. Access removed here, approval delayed there, control no longer automatic. Nothing illegal, nothing dramatic, just structure being respected. One afternoon, I sat on the couch holding the remote control. I turned the television on and off without thinking. The simple act made me pause. Control does not always announce itself. Sometimes it sits quietly in your hand. If this story touches you, please like and subscribe. Stories like this take time to tell, and your support matters. I placed the remote down and stood up. I was not winning, I was restoring balance. And on the other side of the silence, I knew, panic was beginning to grow.
Panic does not arrive all at once. It leaks. It seeps through messages, through tone, through the sudden urgency of people who were once calm. I did not need to see his face to know it had changed. I could hear it in the spaces between his words. The emails became longer. Not angry, not yet. Just detailed, overly detailed, explaining things I already knew. He tried to sound reasonable, cooperative, confused. "I don't understand why this is happening," one message said. "We need to resolve this quickly," said another. Quickly. That word had not mattered to him before. I did not reply. The phone calls increased. Different times, early morning, late evening, times he knew I would be home, times designed to catch me off guard. I kept the phone on silent. Silence was not avoidance anymore.
It was strategy. My lawyer forwarded me copies of their communications. The tone was shifting there, too. Requests turned into concerns. Concerns turned into pressure. He was losing control of the process, and it showed. One afternoon, I received a notification that made me pause. An attempt to access a file he had not touched in years. A file he assumed he owned. The system logged it. Time, device, location. I saved the record and filed it. Facts do not panic. People do. That evening, I heard a knock on the door. Not loud, not aggressive, careful. I stood still for a moment, listening. My heart did not race. I felt grounded. I knew who it was. I did not open the door. The knock came again, then stopped. A message followed. I just want to talk. I read it once, then I placed the phone face down. Talking was no longer necessary. In the days that followed, the pressure expanded outward. His mother contacted extended family. I heard through indirect channels. Concerned voices, questions framed as care. I did not respond to any of them. I had learned something important. Explanations invite opinions. Documents invite decisions. Another letter arrived. This one urgent. It asked for immediate cooperation to avoid unnecessary complications. The phrase made me smile, but only briefly. Unnecessary for whom? My lawyer handled it. He replied with calm language, reminding them of existing agreements, of procedures already in place. No emotion, no accusation, just reality. The panic reached a visible point during a scheduled meeting I did not attend. He showed up. I did not. My absence spoke louder than words. The report from my lawyer was simple. He was unprepared. That sentence stayed with me. The man who once sat across from me so confidently, asking for everything, was now reacting instead of directing. At home, I made small changes. I replaced the lock on one door, not because I was afraid, because it was practical. I moved my work desk closer to the window. Light mattered. I kept my routines intact. Grocery shopping on the same day, laundry on the same schedule. Stability became my quiet answer to chaos. One night, I found myself holding the house keys again. I turned them over in my palm, feeling their weight. They no longer represented shared ownership. They represented responsibility and choice. Another message arrived late that night. This doesn't have to be this way. I deleted it, not out of anger, out of clarity. It already was this way. The panic on the other side grew louder, more visible, more desperate. But I did not move toward it. I stayed where I was, calm, prepared, silent, because panic burns itself out, and I was waiting for the moment when facts would speak louder than fear. The confrontation did not happen in a hallway. It did not happen over the phone. It did not happen in anger. It happened in a quiet room with clean tables and steady chairs, where voices stayed low and facts stayed visible. I arrived early. That was intentional. I chose a seat where the light fell evenly across the table. I placed my folder in front of me, closed. I rested my hands on top of it. They were steady. When he entered, he looked smaller, not physically, structurally. His steps hesitated for just a moment before he sat down. His confidence had been replaced by calculation. He glanced at the folder, then at me. I nodded once. Not greeting, not challenge, acknowledgement. His lawyer spoke first. Long sentences, careful words. Phrases like misunderstanding and cooperation. I listened. When it was my turn, I did not speak immediately. I opened the folder instead. The sound of paper against paper filled the room, slow, deliberate. I slid one document across the table. "This," I said calmly, "is the ownership clause you overlooked." I slid another. "And this is the signature you forgot was mine." Another. "And this is the access limitation you triggered when you tried to move without consent." I did not raise my voice. I did not look at him while speaking. I looked at the papers. They deserved my attention more than him. Silence followed. Not awkward, heavy. He cleared his throat. He asked his lawyer a question, too low for me to hear, with his eyes on me. "Is this necessary?" he asked. I looked up then. "Because talking was never the problem," I replied. His lawyer leaned forward, reviewing the documents. His expression changed slightly, professional interest replacing assumption. We went through everything methodically. No accusations, no stories, no emotional history. Just records, dates, signatures, agreements. At one point, his mother spoke. "This is unnecessary," she said. "We are family." I turned toward her slowly. "Family does not erase documentation," I said quietly. That was the only sentence I directed at her. She said nothing after that. The confrontation ended without shouting, without threats, without drama. It ended with clarity. Boundaries were defined. Access was confirmed. Control was rebalanced. When I stood up, I gathered my folder carefully. I did not rush. I did not look back. At the door, I paused. Not for effect, for closure. "I will continue through legal channels only," I said. "Please respect that." He nodded, slowly. Outside, the air felt lighter. The sky was clear. I breathed deeply. I walked to my car and sat for a moment before starting it. My hands rested on the steering wheel, still steady. The confrontation had not been a battle. It had been a correction. And for the first time since that first meeting, I felt something close to relief. Not because I had won, because I had been seen by the truth.
Order does not return with celebration. It returns quietly, like furniture placed back where it belongs after a long move. You do not notice it all at once. You notice it in how easily you walk through a room without bumping into things. That is how my life began to feel again. The legal process continued, but it no longer felt like a storm. It felt like a system doing its work. Letters arrived on schedule, responses went out on time, nothing urgent, nothing chaotic. The house changed first, not in appearance, but in energy. I replaced the light bulb in the hallway that had flickered for months. I had ignored it before, thinking it was a small thing. Now I understood that small things shape how a place feels. The light stayed steady. I rearranged the keys on the hook by the door. I removed the extra set that no longer belonged to anyone but memory. I did not throw them away. I placed them in a small box and stored them out of sight. Letting go does not always mean destroying. Sometimes it means putting things where they can no longer interrupt your present. The house became fully mine in practice before it did on paper. Bills arrived in my name, clearly. Access was defined, cleanly. No surprises. I paid what I owed, nothing more, nothing less. That balance mattered. The business followed a similar path. Roles were clarified. Authority was no longer assumed, it was written. Meetings happened without tension. Decisions were slower, but they were correct. People adjusted. They always do when structure replaces chaos. I noticed that no one asked me how I felt anymore. They asked what the process was, what the timeline looked like, what documentation was needed. That shift was important. Emotion had left the room. One afternoon, I received a short message from him. "I understand now." I read it once. I did not reply. Understanding does not require response. His mother never contacted me again. That silence felt clean, final. My former friend tried once more. A long message, apologies, explanations. She said she had been trying to keep the peace. Peace built on my silence was never peace. I archived the message. At home, I noticed how naturally I moved through my days. I unlocked the door without hesitation. I adjusted the thermostat without wondering if it would start a discussion. I chose meals based on what I wanted, not what would avoid conflict. The remote control stayed where I left it. That made me smile every time. I sat at the same kitchen table where everything had begun. The documents were no longer spread across it. The surface was clear, just a bowl of fruit and a notebook. I wrote less now. I no longer needed lists to remind me of my strength. The final paperwork arrived on a calm afternoon. I signed it without shaking hands. I placed it in the folder labeled Closed and slid it into the drawer. Order restored. Not revenge, not victory, balance. That evening, I turned off the lights one by one as I walked through the house. Each switch clicked softly, no echo, no tension. In my bedroom, I opened the window and let the night air in. I sat on the bed and exhaled deeply. The life I was living no longer required defense, it required presence. And for the first time in a long while, I slept without listening for footsteps that would never come. Life after does not announce itself with fireworks. It arrives quietly, like sunlight creeping through a curtain, slow and steady, unnoticed at first, but impossible to ignore once it fills the room. I woke up the next morning without dread, no tightness in my chest, no racing thoughts about who had said what or who was trying to take what next. I stretched, feeling my muscles loosen for the first time in months, and noticed the soft hum of the refrigerator, the gentle click of the coffee machine, and the quiet steadiness of the house that had been mine all along. The routines I had built during the quiet days now felt natural. I brewed tea in the same cup, the one I always used, and sipped slowly while scanning the morning papers, not because I needed to control them, but because it was peaceful. It reminded me that the world continued, indifferent to chaos, and that I had reclaimed my own corner of it. I began cooking with more intention. Meals became moments, not chores. I chopped vegetables carefully, stirred sauces slowly, tasting them as I went. The small tasks that once felt mundane now grounded me in a reality I could control. My home was orderly, my mind was calm, and my heart was cautiously free. I returned to work with a quiet confidence. Colleagues noticed the shift. I spoke less but with precision. My decisions carried weight because I was present, observant, and undistracted by fear. People who had once spoken over me now paused and listened, not out of intimidation, but of respect. I started to notice my own resilience in ordinary moments, the way I could organize my day without anxiety, the way I could hold a pen, flip through documents, and make decisions without second-guessing, the way I could answer questions without fear of judgment or retaliation. Each small act reminded me I had survived, I had rebuilt, I had chosen myself. I began to allow myself small joys, long walks in the evening, watching sunlight fall over the trees, the smell of rain on the pavement. Simple pleasures, once overshadowed by tension, now felt deeply rewarding. I listened to music with intention. I journaled my thoughts, not to prove anything to anyone, but to honor the life I was reclaiming. Evenings often ended with quiet reflection. I would sit by the window, looking at the stars, breathing in deep, steady breaths. I remembered the meetings, the silence, the betrayal, the fear, and I realized that each step had been necessary. Pain had become a teacher, patience had become a weapon, and clarity had become a companion. Life after does not erase memory, it does not make the past disappear, but it allows you to move forward with dignity, to recognize your strength, to understand that the chaos of others does not dictate your peace. I finally understood something important. The victory was never in taking from them. The victory was in reclaiming myself. I was no longer defined by fear, by betrayal, by expectations. I was defined by resilience, by patience, by deliberate calm. And as I closed my eyes that night, the house quiet around me, I felt a sense of completion I had never felt before. The chapters of loss, shock, and betrayal had led me here, to a life that was mine, whole and respected. I could finally say, silently, to no one but myself, I am enough. This was life after. The lesson did not come in a single moment. It arrived slowly, like sunlight spreading across a room, revealing everything that had been hidden in shadows. I spent the morning in my kitchen, the same one that had held both my fear and my awakening. I made tea and placed it on the table beside a notebook. I opened the drawer where my documents were now neatly organized, and I looked at them, not as weapons, but as evidence of a life lived deliberately, carefully, and with integrity. I thought about everything that had happened, the shock of that first meeting, the quiet days that followed, the betrayal that cut deeper than I expected, the awakening that gave me patience, the documents that revealed truth, the plan I built with calm precision, the consequences that were subtle but undeniable, the panic on the other side, and finally the confrontation and the restoration of order. Every step had taught me the same thing. Strength does not always roar. Sometimes it whispers. Sometimes it is found in quiet routines, in careful observation, in knowing your worth and refusing to give it away to those who cannot see it. I realized that being underestimated can be dangerous, for the wrong people. Those who assume silence as weakness fail to see the power it can hold. Those who rely on assumptions, favoritism, or half-truths leave themselves vulnerable, and those who betray, even those we love and trust most, cannot take what is truly ours if we know its value. I placed my cup down and let the lessons settle. Control is not about dominance. Control is about clarity. Justice is not always loud. Justice is often quiet, measured, and patient. If you are watching this story unfold on YouTube, remember, your strength is yours to nurture. Protect it, organize it, respect it. Let silence and preparation work for you. If this story touches you, please like, subscribe, and comment to support more stories of resilience and hope. And if you are going through betrayal or loss, remember, help and guidance are always within reach. You are stronger than you realize, and your dignity is yours to protect. The past no longer ruled me. The present was mine, and the future awaited, quiet, steady, and full of possibility. The end.